Greetings folks, and welcome to another episode of 81632-bit. I'm your host Rob, and in this video I'm going to be looking at the 8-bit home micro market in the UK. Now, the reason I'm looking at this is an article was recently posted at the time of making this video on the website The Register, where the author, a British journalist who is in his mid-50s, makes the frankly absurd claim that Christmas 1984 marked the end of the UK 8-bit home computer market and the start of the shift towards the Nintendo NES and Sega Master System as being the dominant platforms. Now, before we go any further, I'm going to say that as somebody who lived through this as a child and into my teens, that is complete and utter nonsense. Yes, Christmas 1984 was the last big Christmas where you had a huge selection of different 8-bit home micros which you could choose from, and there were an awful lot, as I'm about to get into. But what it actually was in reality was the start of what many people would consider to be the golden age of the 8-bit home computer market. You know, the market consolidated itself down to a handful of core platforms, which allowed obviously developers and publishers to focus on these machines, which meant we got more high quality software being put into the market. And the shift, if you like, towards console gaming, especially in the 8-bit consoles, really didn't happen until about 1990. You can have a look at the figures, they're out there on Google if you want to search them. From Christmas 1982 to Christmas 1990, for each of those Christmases, the best-selling computer and or games machine in the UK was the Sinclair Spectrum. Now, that is clearly counter-indicative of what the article on the Register says about the market dying after Christmas 1984. But anyway, without further ado, let's have a look at what options you had at Christmas 1984 first to see why the author may have thought that perhaps this was the end of the market. Now, Christmas 1984, you wanted to buy a computer or your parents wanted to buy you one. Oh boy, did they have choices. Now, obviously, at this point, you already had the Sinclair ZX Spectrum. This was heading towards its third year on the market and was already probably the most popular home computer in the UK. You had Commodore's C64, the more expensive, brash American alternative, which was on its way to building a very strong, very big and very supportive UK base of installs. You had the BBC series of computers, mostly the Model B, which, you know, by this point were becoming ubiquitous in British schools as part of the BBC's computer education programme. Then you had a myriad of other systems out there, such as the Oric Atmos, the Jupiter Ace. Commodore themselves had two other systems out there competing for the marketplace as they massively dumped huge amounts of Commodore 16 and Commodore Plus 4 machines onto the market. You had the Dragon 32, which was still a platform at the time. And, you know, that's where the market was in terms of the big players. Oh, lest we forget, of course, the Jupiter Ace. Now, as we move on through 85, Amstrad arrive in the market with the CPC range, specifically the CPC 464, and it's the ZX Spectrum, the Commodore 64 and the CPC range which become the big three of the market. Now, they dominated software sales until the end of the 80s, and, you know, they really were well established. Yes, the BBC had a reasonable foothold in the educational sector with its Model A, Model B and Master, and there was their home cut down version, the Acorn Electron, which saw commercial software released up until around about 87. But realistically, it was the big three that dominated, and they really did. You know, it's not like after Christmas 1984, when the majority of these machines disappeared from the market, that gaming and home computers in the UK ceased to be a thing. If anything, as I said earlier, this was the beginning of a golden age of software. You know, with the three main systems being the ones that were competing for people's money, the big software publishers of the time could focus on these and produce great games. Indeed, after Christmas 1984, that's when we started to really see programs start to push these machines. You would see games like Head Over Heels, Batman the Caped Crusader, RoboCop, the Spectrum version of Cobra, you know, Chase HQ, some great bits of 8-bit software which apparently arrived in this market, which, according to the Register's author, was dead, and people were moving on to the NES and the Master System. Well, they weren't. This was still very much a point in time where the 8-bit micros ruled. And of course, once you get past sort of 1987, and especially when you hit 1989, you then have the 16-bit machines such as the Atari ST and the Commodore Amiga starting to take an ever larger part of the market. You know, this was not some kind of video game crash like they had in the US when Atari tanked in 1983, which seems to be something that the author of the article is indicating, that this also hit the UK home computer market, and it really didn't. And bear in mind, this crash was a myth anyway globally, because the Commodore 64, which was released before the mythical video game crash of 1983, became the best-selling single home computer of all time, with somewhere in the region of 20 plus million units of hardware sold. You know, the British market had the Spectrum, which sold millions of units of hardware. The CPC range also sold a huge amount of hardware. The market was very much not dead. And the Register's author would do well to revise his article to reflect this. And instead of saying that that's when the market died, that's when the market consolidated and you got the UK 8-bit micro market. Now, I mentioned a load of systems earlier on in the video, from Auric, from Jupiter, from Dragon. They were all interesting little machines of their own type, but the market was too fragmented. There were too many options. People were looking for stability. They wanted something that they knew they could get software for, and that's where Commodore, Sinclair and later Amstrad had the advantage. Their machines could do more. They were better. Yes, even the Spectrum, which many people derided, was a lot better than systems like the Jupiter Ace, for example. Now, you may have your own perspective on this. If you do, feel free to leave a comment down below. You know, this is a subject that does get people discussing things. Now, I've laid out where I think it was. You tell me what you think. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, do give it a thumbs up. If you've really enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button. And if you really enjoyed it and you subscribed, don't forget to ring the bell to be notified of when I next do an update. There's also options to support me if you wish, to either my Ko-fi page as a one-off option. There's my Patreon page, and there's also YouTube memberships available. And as usual, big shout out to Leftback and Old Scott Retro for their continued support. You'll find all the details linked at the end of the video on the title card. And this has been Rob, talking about the UK 8-bit home micros market of the 80s. And I will see you on the next video. Bye bye for now.